You are not here by accident, and this moment is not random. Something within you already knows that what you are hearing is not information but remembrance. Not something new to acquire, but something ancient to recover. Long before you learned your name, your roles, your wounds, your ambitions, and your fears, there was an awareness that simply was. And that awareness is still here, quietly observing, patiently waiting, never anxious, never in a hurry, never doubting its own worth. This is the part of you that does not chase, does not beg, does not strive. This is the part of you that attracts effortlessly, not by effort, but by alignment. We spend so much of our lives believing that fulfillment exists somewhere outside of us, just over the horizon of achievement, just beyond the next milestone, just past the next relationship, the next paycheck, the next moment when the world finally gives us permission to feel whole. And yet, the deeper truth, the one that gently dissolves the ego and awakens the soul, is that life is not responding to what you want. Life is responding to what you are. Not what you say you want, not what you think you deserve, but what you are embodying at the level of consciousness. You see, wanting is often rooted in a subtle belief of lack. Wanting says, I do not have. Wanting says, something is missing. Wanting says, when this arrives, then I will be complete. And the universe, which is extraordinarily obedient, responds not to the words, but to the vibration beneath them. It hears the belief, not the desire. It responds to the identity, not the wish. And so it continues to mirror back experiences that confirm what you are convinced of inside, that you are not enough yet, that you are incomplete, that something outside of you must arrive before peace is possible. This is not punishment. This is not cruelty. This is love in its most precise form. Life is always teaching you who you believe yourself to be. When you look honestly at your patterns, the relationships that repeat, the obstacles that recur, the emotional reactions that feel automatic, you begin to see that they are not accidents, they are reflections. They are mirrors held up not to your circumstances, but to your consciousness. And the moment you stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And instead ask, what is this revealing about what I am carrying within me? You step out of victimhood and into authorship. You move from reaction to creation. This is where true healing begins. Not in fixing the world, but in understanding the self. Not in controlling outcomes, but in clarifying identity. You are not your past. You are not your trauma. You are not the story you've been repeating to explain your pain. Those are experiences you've had, not definitions of who you are. And yet, when the ego is left unchecked, it clings to those stories because they provide familiarity. The ego would rather be familiar than free. It would rather be right than peaceful. It would rather protect an old identity than surrender to a higher truth. And so it whispers, this is just how I am, not realizing that this sentence is one of the most limiting affirmations a human being can speak. You are not just how you are. You are how you have been conditioned to believe you are. The ego thrives on comparison, judgment, resentment, and fear because these keep attention focused outward. As long as you are measuring yourself against others, blaming circumstances, replaying old wounds, or anxiously projecting into the future, you remain disconnected from the present moment, the only place where transformation is possible. The ego is always either remembering or anticipating. The soul is always now. And in this now moment, there is nothing missing. This is perhaps the most radical truth you will ever encounter. Your worth is not negotiable. It does not increase with success or diminish with failure. It does not depend on approval, productivity, attractiveness, or usefulness. It is intrinsic. It is inherent. It is non-transferable. You were worthy before you accomplished anything, and you will be worthy even when you accomplish nothing at all. To understand, this is not arrogance. It is humility, because it acknowledges that your value does not come from the ego's efforts, but from the source that created you. When you begin to live from this understanding, something extraordinary happens. You stop trying to get love, and you start being love. You stop chasing validation, and you start radiating authenticity. You stop manipulating outcomes, and you start trusting intelligence far greater than the thinking mind. And life responds accordingly. You do not attract abundance by obsessing over money. You attract abundance by embodying a consciousness of sufficiency, generosity, and trust. You do not attract love by fearing abandonment. You attract love by knowing your own completeness. You do not attract peace by fighting anxiety. You attract peace by releasing resistance to the present moment. The outer world reorganizes itself around the inner state because the inner state is the cause and the outer experience is the effect. This is not philosophy meant to impress the intellect. This is a law as reliable as gravity. Think of your consciousness as a tuning fork. Whatever frequency you are vibrating at determines what harmonizes with you. When you are vibrating at fear, you attract circumstances that require fear. When you are vibrating at resentment, you attract situations that justify resentment. When you are vibrating at self-doubt, you attract obstacles that confirm it. And when you shift even slightly into trust, compassion, gratitude, and presence, life begins to introduce people, opportunities, and insights that align with that new frequency. This is why personal growth is never about becoming someone else. It is about unbecoming everything you are not. It is about shedding false identities, inherited beliefs, and conditioned fears that have obscured your natural state. The oak tree does not strain to become an oak. It simply removes what blocks the acorn from expressing its inherent design. In the same way, you are not here to manufacture greatness, you are here to allow it. But allowance requires surrender, and surrender is frightening to the ego. The ego equates surrender with loss of control, not realizing that control was always an illusion. You have never controlled the beating of your heart, the rising of the sun, or the unfolding of life itself. And yet, somehow, everything has continued. Life has been living you just as much as you have been living life. The moment you stop resisting this truth, you feel relief. The moment you stop arguing with what is, you experience grace. Forgiveness plays a central role in this awakening, not as a moral obligation, but as a practical necessity for freedom. Holding resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to suffer. It keeps you anchored to the past, replaying moments that no longer exist, draining energy that could be used for creation. There are no justified resentments because resentment only hurts one person, the one holding it. Forgiveness is not about condoning behavior. It is about reclaiming your own peace. When you forgive, you are not saying, "What happened was acceptable." You are saying, "I choose not to let this define my inner world." You are choosing alignment over attachment, freedom over familiarity. And as you release these energetic anchors, you may notice something remarkable. Your external circumstances begin to shift without effort. People change, opportunities appear, obstacles dissolve. Not because you force them to, but because the inner environment that sustained them is no longer present. This is the quiet power of inner work. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It simply transforms. Living in the now is not a technique, it is a recognition. The present moment is not something you enter, it is something you remember. You never left. Anxiety dissolves when attention returns to now because anxiety cannot survive without a future to project into. Regret dissolves when attention returns to now because regret cannot survive without a past to revisit. Peace is not something you find, it is what remains when the mind stops traveling. And in this stillness, you may begin to sense something subtle but profound. The intelligence that animates you is the same intelligence that animates everything. You are not separate from life. You are an expression of it. You are not a fragment struggling to survive in a hostile universe. You are the universe experiencing itself through a unique perspective. This understanding dissolves loneliness at its root. How can you be alone when you are made of the same substance as the stars? The soul always knows. Long before logic catches up, long before evidence appears, long before circumstances change, there is an inner knowing that whispers, "This is the way." The challenge is not that the soul is silent. It is that the mind is loud. The ego demands proof, guarantees, timelines, and reassurance. The soul asks only for trust, and trust grows not through control, but through alignment. When you act from alignment, effort feels different. It is not forced, it is inspired. You are not pushing against life, you are cooperating with it. And when resistance falls away, synchronicity emerges. You meet the right people at the right time. You hear the right words when you need them. Doors open, not because you knocked harder, but because you were finally ready to walk through them. This readiness is not about worthiness. You are always worthy. It is about identity. Who are you being in this moment? A seeker who believes fulfillment is elsewhere, or a creator who recognizes it within? A victim of circumstance, or a conscious participant in the unfolding of life? A body with a soul, or a soul having a human experience? When you identify with the ego, life feels like a struggle. When you identify with the soul, life feels like a dance. The music does not always change, but your relationship to it does. And as this relationship shifts, you may notice that what you once desperately wanted loses its grip on you. Not because it was wrong, but because it was never the source of fulfillment you imagined. What you were really seeking was a feeling, peace, freedom, love, significance. And these were always available internally. The external goals were simply symbols the mind used to justify allowing those feelings. Once you realize you can allow them now, the chase ends. This is the paradox. When you stop chasing, things start arriving. When you stop needing, you start receiving. When you stop proving, you start attracting. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. So be peace, and peace will find you. Be love, and love will recognize itself in your presence. Be trust, and life will show you reasons to trust. Be gratitude, and abundance will multiply. This is not wishful thinking, it is spiritual physics. And remember, transformation is not a dramatic event. It is a gentle, moment-by-moment choice to return to truth, to notice when the ego tightens and to soften, to notice when fear speaks and to listen without obeying, to notice when the past calls and to remain present. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you shift your frequency. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, you realign with your nature. Every time you choose now over later, you step into freedom. There is nothing you need to add to yourself to be whole. There is only what you need to release. And as you release beliefs, identities, resentments, fears, you may discover that what remains is not emptiness, but fullness, not weakness, but strength, not confusion, but clarity. This is who you were before the world told you who to be. This is who you are beneath the noise. And from this place, everything follows. And from this place, everything follows, not because you command life to obey you, but because you are no longer in conflict with it. When you stop arguing with reality, reality stops arguing with you. When you stop insisting that life be different before you allow yourself to feel whole, life gently rearranges itself to mirror that wholeness back to you. You begin to notice that effort transforms into intention. Struggle transforms into clarity. Control transforms into cooperation. The need to dominate outcomes dissolves into a quiet confidence that whatever unfolds is unfolding with you, not against you. This is not passive resignation. This is conscious alignment. It is the deepest form of power there is, the power that does not push, but attracts. Most people misunderstand attraction. They think it is about visualizing objects, repeating affirmations, or forcing optimism. But attraction is not a technique. It is a state of being. It is not about what you say to yourself, but about what you believe without words. It is not about convincing the universe. It is about becoming congruent with the truth of who you are. When your inner world is fragmented, when part of you wants and another part doubts, when part of you hopes and another part fears, you emit mixed signals. Life reflects that confusion back as delay, inconsistency, or resistance. But when your inner world becomes coherent, when your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs align with a deeper knowing, the signal becomes clear, and clarity is magnetic. This is why healing always precedes manifestation. You cannot create sustainably from a wounded identity. You can achieve, yes, but achievement without healing becomes another mask, another distraction, another attempt to outrun an inner emptiness that will not be silenced by success. True fulfillment comes not from adding more to your life, but from subtracting what is false. The ego resists this subtraction because it has invested heavily in the illusion of becoming. It tells you that you are a project, a work in progress, something to be improved, optimized, perfected. And while growth is natural, the belief that you are fundamentally incomplete is not. That belief is the root of suffering. It keeps you striving for a future self instead of honoring the presence of the self that already is. The soul, on the other hand, knows that growth is expansion, not repair. A flower does not bloom because it is broken. It blooms because that is its nature. In the same way, your evolution is not about fixing what is wrong with you, but about expressing what is right with you more fully. As you begin to live from this understanding, you may notice subtle shifts in how you relate to time. The urgency softens. The impatience loosens its grip. You stop asking, when will it happen? And start asking, who am I being while I wait? And in that question, waiting itself transforms. It becomes a sacred interval, not a punishment. A gestation period, not a delay. Nothing in nature rushes, and yet everything is accomplished. The seasons do not compete with one another. Winter does not apologize for resting. Spring does not demand proof before it blooms. Summer does not cling when it is time to let go. Autumn does not mourn what falls away. Each phase trusts the intelligence that moves it. And you are no different. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to become who you are becoming. This is why comparison is so corrosive to the spirit. When you measure your life against someone else's timeline, you disconnect from your own rhythm. You forget that growth is not linear, that awakening is not predictable, that transformation does not follow a schedule. Each soul unfolds according to its own design. And the moment you stop comparing, you reclaim your energy. Energy is precious. Where you place your attention determines the quality of your experience. Attention given to fear amplifies fear. Attention given to gratitude amplifies abundance. Attention given to judgment strengthens separation. Attention given to compassion dissolves it. This is not moral philosophy. It is energetic law. What you feed grows. What you starve fades. So ask yourself gently, without condemnation, where is my attention habitually resting? On what is wrong or on what is real? On what is lacking or on what is alive? On what has hurt me or on what is healing me right now? These questions are not meant to induce guilt. They are meant to invite awareness. Awareness is the doorway to choice. And choice is the birthplace of freedom. Freedom does not mean the absence of challenge. It means the absence of identification with struggle. Challenges will arise, that is the nature of form. But when you are rooted in being rather than becoming, challenges no longer threaten your identity. They become invitations rather than obstacles, teachers rather than enemies. Even pain, when met with presence, transforms. Pain resisted becomes suffering. Pain accepted becomes wisdom. Pain observed becomes compassion. And compassion, perhaps more than anything else, is the signature of an awakened life. When you recognize your own humanity with tenderness, you recognize it in others. Judgment falls away because you see yourself everywhere. Forgiveness becomes natural because you understand that everyone is acting from their level of consciousness just as you are. This understanding does not make you passive, it makes you peaceful. It does not make you indifferent, it makes you discerning. You learn to say yes without attachment and no without guilt. You learn to participate fully without losing yourself. You learn to love deeply without clinging. And as your relationships shift, so does your sense of self. You stop seeking completion through others. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop asking people to fill spaces that were never empty to begin with. Love becomes an expression, not a transaction. A sharing, not a bargaining. This is when you truly understand that you are already enough, not as a concept, but as a lived reality. Enough not because you have achieved some standard, but because you are aligned with your source. Enough not because life is perfect, but because your relationship to life is honest. Enough not because nothing hurts, but because nothing defines you. From this place of enoughness, generosity flows naturally. You give without depletion. You serve without self-erasure. You create without attachment to outcome. And paradoxically, this is when life gives back most abundantly, not because you are trying to receive, but because you are open. Openness is the key. A closed heart cannot attract. A guarded mind cannot receive. A contracted identity cannot expand. When you soften, life enters. When you trust, life responds. When you allow, life surprises you. You begin to see that miracles are not violations of natural law. They are expressions of alignment with it. They occur not when you beg, but when you believe. Not when you force, but when you flow. Not when you demand, but when you surrender. Surrender does not mean giving up your dreams. It means releasing your grip on how they must arrive. It means trusting that the intelligence that placed the desire within you knows how to fulfill it in ways the ego cannot predict. It means letting go of the illusion that your limited perspective knows best. When you surrender in this way, anxiety loses its fuel, control loses its purpose, resistance loses its argument. And what remains is a quiet joy, not the excitement of getting what you want, but the peace of being who you are. This joy is not dependent on circumstances. It does not fluctuate with outcomes. It is not loud or dramatic. It is steady, grounded, spacious. It feels like coming home to yourself after a long journey of seeking. And perhaps that is what this life has always been, a remembering rather than a becoming, a return rather than a conquest, a softening rather than a struggle. You were never meant to attract happiness by chasing it. You were meant to embody happiness by aligning with your nature. You were never meant to earn love by proving your worth. You were meant to express love by recognizing it within. You were never meant to control life into submission. You were meant to cooperate with its intelligence. So rest in this knowing. Let it settle beneath your thoughts, beneath your habits, beneath your fears. Let it inform how you breathe, how you listen, how you respond. Let it guide you back to yourself again and again. Because when you change within, not by force, but by awareness, everything follows. Not because the world suddenly becomes perfect, but because you finally see it clearly. And in that clarity, you are free. This is emotional maturity. Not the absence of desire, but the absence of attachment. Attachment says, I cannot be okay unless this happens. Alignment says, I am okay, and I welcome what happens. From this place, gratitude becomes effortless. Not gratitude as politeness, but gratitude as perception. You begin to notice what is already working, already supporting you, already unfolding. You see that breath is a gift. Awareness is a gift. Existence itself is a miracle so ordinary that the mind overlooks it. Gratitude shifts your frequency instantly.